I'm Joanne Wilson, and this is Positively Gotham Gal. Real, honest, and meaningful conversations with women entrepreneurs about their approach to life, business, and everything in between.
Sorry, this is probably the easiest, most safest way for us to go about this.
I love that. Totally love that. How old?
So almost 2 months.
Wow, that's so great. Congratulations. So are you working out of your house? Like, where are you working?
Yeah, so we have a studio space in New York, as you know, and that's primarily where we do a lot of production. We host our customers. I mean, it's really kind of the home base. But I am working from home, but I actually moved to back home to Hawaii, actually.
Did you?
During the pandemic, I have a daughter who's 3 years old. Family's here, and we came back. My dad, um, we were moving back to take care of family, and essentially, yeah, I've been here trying to figure out the New York and Hawaii thing, which has been a little bit difficult, but
Yeah, that's a bit of a schlep,
yeah,
but you'll figure it out.
absolutely.
So I'm super excited to talk to you, Natasha. I think what you have built is so spot on in terms of what's happening and timing and rethinking about repurposing and clothing and individuality. And so, I also love that it started as a passion project,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so a lot of companies do, and those are usually the most successful ones. So, sort of like walk us through your background. I mean, you grew up in Hawaii, and were you always a seamstress with like a sewing machine in your bedroom?
Absolutely not. You would think so. Although I like to thank my mom for being super crafty. I mean, back growing up, she would make a lot of our Halloween costumes, which, timely. And like, you should be making things, but they both own their own businesses. So I grew up kind of within a retail environment, within entrepreneurial kind of
Spirit.
being, yeah, spirit, and just kind of going after things and making things happen on your own. But the fashion thing kind of just came upon, it was a personal interest of mine. I never really was able to pursue it, as my parents thought it wasn't really a viable career path at the time.
So, what kind of businesses do your parents
I
own?
mean, they had like a 1 hour photo shop and a candy shop. It was like pure retail. I grew up like in a traditional mall. Instead of, people think, oh, growing up in Hawaii, I was on the beach all day. I was pretty much in a mall all day growing up in my parents' shop. They, I think, saw me as owning my own business, but I think because fashion was so foreign to my family, of course, they also knew how hard it was running your own business to begin with, let alone running fashion. It wasn't something that I was really able to explore until later down the road after I had my 9 to 5 job. I was able to really invest in myself. And it was only then in like 2014, I had started doing a pattern making program. So
And where were you doing that program?
it was in Oakland. I was in California.
So you went from Hawaii and then you went to
Yeah.
California. Did you go to college in between, or you just did?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So where'd you go to school?
University of Laverne.
Got it. Yeah.
Southern California. So I was there, and after graduating, I moved up to the Bay Area, started working in tech, and then from there,
That's what you do there.
yeah, surprise.
Exactly.
So yes, I was working in tech, and but again, it it provided this platform for me financially to then think about, okay, how do I invest in myself and the interests that I had. So yeah, I took a program on the side while working, and that's when I just started. Things just kind of snowballed. I kind of
Right.
just did a little bit more, pushed myself a little bit more, learned a little bit more about the industry, all while working my other job, and which had no relation to fashion at
Yeah.
all.
What tech industry? Who did you work for?
For Airbnb,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, I
Great.
know,
Amazing.
traveled,
I hope you got some stock.
yeah, yeah, self funded business.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and just I, yeah, from there, kind of. Uh, was able to obviously transfer a lot of skills. I was doing event planning and production a bit.
Got it.
Yeah, and
Got it.
it's like program management.
So, and then how did it take off? I mean, the one thing that's interesting is that I know that you can make an appointment
Yeah.
and you can have items made that are made specifically for you. And what's interesting is, and I'm sure you know this, but in the, I want to say around 2009, 2010, there were a bunch of businesses that were launched in the tech space that were about, I mean, even Levi's tried to do it,
Yeah.
right? Which is making an item for your body
Yeah.
specifically because all the specs, as we all know, are the same specs from years ago. And if it's a new designer and you bring in a new model who's your spec person, then all the specs change.
Yeah.
So it's not based on any particular like consistent model that you know that if I'm a size 6, I'm a size 6 in every single thing that you ever buy.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the power of what we try to educate our customers on is the tool of measurements, right? That is something that truly is standard, and I think that's the key to our fitting appointments, and that's what we really measure everything on when it comes to customization. It's really around someone's measurements, and it's not like we're necessarily taking something we're producing a garment from scratch, right?
Hmm.
That is difficult, but we rework the garment, so there are some areas that are already kind of done for us. So instead of spending all that time producing a garment from scratch, we get to take that time to customize. I think if you're customizing a garment from scratch, like adding the zipper, the button, like all that stuff, all that time, we just transfer it into like doing something completely different with the garment.
Which is really interesting. I mean, my original background where I started out was as a buyer, and then I worked in the garment center. So I've lived in many places with the the yellow thing that you have behind you,
Yeah.
and understand how to make a garment. And it's a very different world. I mean, so you started this, you took this class. So talk about sort of the journey then, and how'd you come up with the name, the Consistency Project?
Well, yeah, so I'll start with that. Basically, it was a project, so it's as
Yes.
straightforward as it came. But for me, it was learning about the industry, and I didn't want to necessarily just create something, even passion project, without the intention of how it impacted the rest of my life or my lifestyle. And so, fashion essentially was something I was passionate about, but also there was a dark side of, the wastefulness and how things were produced, their wages, etc. It was like a whole deep kind of space that I was just getting into. And I realized, if I can like devote a lot of time in how I shop secondhand or reuse or reclaim within fashion, I should be able to take that and transfer it to other parts of my life, whether food or just day-to-day life of laundry, etc. And so really the thought was that if you can do something in one part of your life, you can try to provide consistency across your entire life. And I think that's where we can truly make an impact. And I think that's key to the foundation still of the business, that we are able to inspire people, to give them tools to take it beyond just the product that we sell. For example, if we provide the tool of measurements, you're taking that and using it as a tool in other parts of your life,
Right.
beyond just shopping with us.
Well, that you're wearing a garment that you understand came from something before, with the thought process of, like, as you said, you took a deep dive into the fashion world, which is probably the largest businesses that is insanely difficult for our planet.
Absolutely, absolutely.
From the fabrics to right from the very beginning all the way till it gets to the floor. I mean, it takes a lot of water to make a t-shirt. And, they're not using gray water. They're using fresh water to make more fabrications. And it just continues down the line, even in regards to the people that are making these products before it gets to the floor where you buy it. And no one has any idea, this whole concept of even of like making it in America. It's like, well, yeah, you don't want to have it made in America if you want a $20 t-shirt, because guess what? We
Yeah.
pay people $20 an hour.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy to think that people don't understand that the mathematics around, like, oh, if you're buying a garment, how much time do you think this actually takes? Therefore, how much, materials, and how much is the person getting paid making that? I mean, and I think that's why shopping secondhand, or when it comes to reuse, is so important for people to feel comfortable doing. I think it's one of those things where the impact is truly there when everyone can do at least a little bit of it versus, someone feeling the burden of doing everything, only
It
specifically shopping
is.
secondhand, which, personally I've tried, but it's sometimes very, very difficult. I mean, when you're like a mom of two, it's like sometimes you just have to make, sacrifices in that area. And I think that's the thought of our project, is trying to make people have a different relationship with shopping secondhand, because I think there's also a lot of difficulties and different avenues of how you can shop secondhand, with a thrift store or a curated vintage shop or online platforms like ThreadUp, and so I think there's just all of these different ways. And so when we engage with someone, we are able to then say, hey, here's another side to shopping secondhand, and here are the tools to hopefully help you shop secondhand anywhere else.
Right. Or parts of your life, right? If you're making a purchase and you understand the thought process behind it, then hopefully you'll make that thought process in other parts of your life.
Yes, and honestly, sometimes it's hard not to, because you then start to think, and you start to consider, oh, well, maybe I can just get this other thing actually on the same platform, Facebook Marketplace or things like that. People start to then go out a little bit of their comfort zone, and we also like to think that we push people outside of their comfort zone stylistically as well, and so it's just those little things that we try to think about and do within the business that we hope then carries forward, beyond us.
I mean, I think we're in a very interesting place, even as the world is sort of shifting. And you think about all the luxury brands and how they've all depended on China and how many garments they make a year. I mean, even if you look at, people that have won the fashion award with the CDMA, and you win that, and all of a sudden you go from like, I'm a top designer, I made 15 garments, it was such a success, and then you turn around and within 10 years they're making 300 SKUs, because that's the industry. Grow next year, more product, more product, more product. And I've watched so many designers over the years, because I love the fashion business, and I think, oh my God, they just killed that designer, right? Because they were so creative. No one could be that creative around 300 SKUs.
Yeah, I mean, it is so absurd because, of course, you want to grow as a business, and that's why you're doing what you're doing. At the same time, I think there's a level of responsibility that we need to understand, and we can't. There's a certain, yeah, like, I guess, feeling of like, trying to push things too much, unless you're exploring other ways to balance that, like
Yes.
by creating incentive programs, essentially, that really might cut into your margins potentially, but overall are really providing a all-around service to the customer, but it's not beyond the product, right? So I think it's always thinking, I think businesses, you can exist as a business and contribute to this, like, having people buy things, but at the same time, what are you doing to then turn it around? What to ask them, what's in your closet? How are you recycling? Like, how are you buying? I think those are the type of things we're hoping to explore.
I get that. I mean, I think it's really hard. I mean, when people think about retail therapy, right? It's like all you want to do some days is just go out and buy something, right?
Yeah, I
And
know.
and that's a tough one. I have to say, I love your tagline, based in New York with roots in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And I assume you came up with this tagline, so it just really defines who you are.
I mean, yeah, I think any business, really, sometimes the root of it really is founded from, like, really the founder, like the person who started it. A lot of the values, a lot of the experiences, the cultural, impact, like everything kind of fuses into the business. So yeah, I would definitely think that business is a huge part of me, and vice versa.
And do you think your climate roots came from growing up in Hawaii, which is probably a lot more sustainable to some of the climate issues we're having today?
You would be surprised though at the sustainability efforts here in Hawaii. It's actually not as I guess not, I wouldn't say developed, but I think not as progressive in like trying to innovate in certain areas. So when you think about things like solar, right? Like we are a state that really gets sun 365 days a
Pretty
year.
much, yeah.
So, it would be wise for a state like ours to invest in solar for everyone, for businesses, etc., like building some kind of structure around that, yet it's very, very far from that. So I think I think being back home though, it's something actually positive. I think a lot of times people grow up in Hawaii, what they do is they leave and then sometimes they never come back. And so coming back is really being able to bring whatever like knowledge or whatever you think you've kind of learned outside and then trying to move, your home forward.
Totally. So where are you sourcing all of these fabrics?
So it's not really a fabric thing; it's more of a garment thing.
Right, you're right.
So
You're right. You're absolutely
yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different of an approach, but it essentially can be approached similarly. We will essentially partner up with certain businesses like Stanray, the painter plant. We work directly with them on their dead stock that they've kind of been sitting on for, decades, many
I'm
years.
shocked that they've kept it.
Yeah, which, I think sometimes it's actually sometimes hard to dispose of your stuff, as a business. I think what happens is like, okay, there's, imperfection, you set it aside, and all of a sudden 10 years pass by,
You have a
you
factory.
turn around and you look at all this stuff that you've just set aside and it's gone from like 10 to like thousands. And it's because you're just going and going, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, what do I do with this stuff? And at one point they sold everything to like a vintage warehouse.
Right.
They sold like bales of it, and that's where I originally found them, is working through a vintage warehouse that happened to buy, hundreds and hundreds of their pants, found it there initially, and of course at some point the pants, they're you can't purchase them through there anymore. And Sanri actually reached out directly to me and said, hey, we love what you're doing, and we still have a lot of pants that we like, what? Like there was a point where I was like, okay, we can't, when you work with reclaimed materials or dead stock, you always plan for an end. It's like, and so you really kind of think like, okay, if we don't have these pants, what is it next, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, they came through, and then now we work directly with them. And I think, sometimes there might be a point, but also in the world, as you know, of production, there's always something coming up to like a quality control. So some imperfections, etc. There's always that. And so I think if we're able to position ourselves to work with those type of, garments, that is a great way to kind of sustain long term. But, in the future, we hope to work with other brands. And when it comes to just other materials, sometimes it's directly through vintage warehouses that really focus on having a range of the same style of something. Still one of one, but like a bulk.
Right. Well, if I'm sure they're either giving it to you or you're buying it from them, but certainly not a very expensive price point. So I'm going to assume that your margins are pretty good based on the fact that you're using materials.
You would think. I'm not going to give specific numbers. It's only, about $10 less than new.
Right, exactly.
Right? I mean, so, yeah, it's like you would think, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that you are expressing value in something that many people think don't have value. And I think, when it comes to even just vintage, in general, I mean, it's just become such a big, part of the fashion industry now that,
Well, they're waking up.
wholesale it's not, we're not just going to a thrift store, with like $1, $5 pieces.
Not at this point.
Yeah, it's like it's not like that. So, but at the same time, margins are always thinner, more on the labor. So you save sometimes more on maybe the garment, but when you think about the labor that goes into, or the process that goes into reworking the garment, that is where the cost adds up. And I think that's where sometimes we, as a brand that can't look towards other businesses to compare ourselves, we're like, oh, is there anyone
No,
it's like
you're forging a new path.
it's you're like, okay, pricing, like how do you, like, traditional fashion models don't work for us. And even when it comes to how do we scale production outside of being in-house,
How do you scale production?
right? Like we are talking to, we have talked to multiple different production houses, and really we've come at roadblocks where, one, sometimes they don't necessarily want to work with us because we only use reclaimed materials,
Right.
and it's too foreign. Two, they'll work with us, but they want us to invest in the time that it takes for them to relearn a new process.
Totally.
And I get that, but as a small business, to invest that much, you're like, okay, it has to be a timing thing. We have to save up for that. It's like a huge investment on something that I feel like, I think it should be shared. But of course, for them, they're like, well, we rather just work with another brand that's, they're sustainable, they're using organic cotton, but it's new, and they can work in a way where they can, cut things in mass, produce things in mass. And,
yes,
it's like, why would they take time to work with someone like us when it is more complicating than what they're used to? But I can say that it's not necessarily more, it feels like more work initially, but it actually can be scalable.
Right, I'm sure
is what
it
we're
is.
exploring.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could have your own place where you have cutters and people that work for you, and create a brand new, sort of a brand new model for what you're doing.
Yes.
And but everything can, so you make an appointment. Where do you make this appointment, or is someone walk you through a Zoom call to go through your measurements that are needed from, the inseam to your waist?
Well, it depends on which, if you're going to purchase something online. If you're purchasing online, we do then do a consultation that is like a Zoom call, and we are able to walk you through that and give you a little bit more context to what you can do customizing your pant. But when it comes to coming in person to your New York studio, you go online, you book an appointment, you fill out a form that kind of gives us some information about if you even know your size, if there's any past fit issues you've had, and maybe trying to describe a bit, like, do you identify as curvy versus straight, or in between, so giving us a little bit of background. And then from there you show up and we're like, hey, and we walk you through like what we think is a very kind of unique experience. Most times people come in and they're just shocked at, like, one, the attention, two, I think it's just, again, the educational piece, and then three, what we can offer, which is, again, against non-traditional, or it's a little non-traditional when it comes to retail.
Oh, yeah, I mean, totally. So, what are you working on in terms of new collections for the year ahead? And because that's the one thing about the fashion business, it's not like you hit this point where it's just, you're reinventing every single day.
It's sometimes really hard for us to be like, okay, we need to focus, and we can't necessarily get distracted to want to create, new collections every month, which we absolutely can't. But I think, we really kind of explored this idea of American workwear and traditional workwear within the scope of, like, utility and, like, manual labor, right? So, like, Stanley painter pants, it's like a very specific cut and style that identifies with traditional workwear. But we would love to explore with this new collection next year a different side of workwear when you think about when you go to an office, or what do other people do and what do they do when they wear something, or what do they wear to work, and how do we kind of take those traditional silhouettes and make something still fun but functional and comfortable that can transition from life to work back to life. Because I think that's the beauty of New York. You're going to work and then you're hopping over to meet your friends for dinner in the
Totally.
bar, like that can just transition, and then you're on the subway and you're not worried that it will get ripped or dirty or something happens. And so taking other traditional workwear outside of what we think is what we're really excited to do.
I really love that. And so how many people are working for you at this point?
One full time and one part time, and me.
That's
Three.
amazing. That's so amazing. Well, I love what you're doing. I mean, the whole thing is super cool. And, that you thinking about the world at large, and you took a passion project and you brought it to life. I mean, and fashion is hard.
It is. Sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? Um,
Have you thought about getting into other things beside that, like creating poofs or pillows, or, I mean,
Home, yeah,
yeah,
home accessories, primarily because when we work with pants, the cutoffs tend to be much larger. So for us to be able to save those scraps and reclaim them, we're able to sew those pieces together and then create smaller, accessories, so bags and pillows and stuff. So we are exploring that. It's definitely a little easier, but we still have our complex, production process of using the reclaimed
right,
material.
because everyone's body is different. So you're essentially, piecing together all these vintage materials, and you're making one big, huge piece of fabric
Yeah,
and then cutting
essentially.
it for those items.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly what it is. And we also, again, like when you make an appointment, you don't necessarily have to customize a pant with our patchwork. We have our like painter pants. We have like vintage denim already as is. But what we also do is do very basic alterations that actually transform a garment's fit to be perfect for you. And so I think that's also a lot of people are so used to now shopping for something, buying a size that they think they are, and then they get it. It doesn't really fit well, but they wear it anyway because it kind of fits.
And
And
they
then you
love it.
realize, and then you realize, okay, well, maybe they could have done something like taking it to a tailor, gotten the right inseam at the very least, and you're like, wow, it's transformed into a completely new piece or pant. And
Completely.
so we do those basic alterations also in our studio, and I think that also is a very important educational moment for a lot of our customers, because then they realize, wow, I can go out, buy things secondhand, I can take it to my local tailor, make a few alterations, and it's something that I will wear every day, which
Yeah.
is what we want.
Yeah, no, I totally think it's fantastic. I love what you're doing. I love your designs. I think the whole thing is great. And it'll be very interesting to see how this type of thought process in this industry takes hold. As I mean, certainly right now the planet is one of the most important buzzwords that are happening, that I hope does not go away, although these people that are throwing shit at, Monets or these big paintings around the world, is,
Uh,
I'm not so sure that's the way to continue to keep up the conversation, but
yeah.
at least it's being highlighted.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it is. I think it's just the beginning, and I think we're not the only brand. I think exploring things, and I think we just hope to be one of many, like to like collectively make the impact that we hope to see.
Yeah, it's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
And
thank you
what's
for
what's
having
the
me.
baby's name there?
Oh, Zella.
Zella.
She's been sleeping. I was like, I most times I have her on me when I'm like working, and I'm like, oh, I know she'll for sure be sleeping on me. Versus if I put her down, there's a potential that she'll wake
She
up
would have
and
been
say,
awake.
yeah.
No, it's great. She's going to end up being an entrepreneur too.
I mean, that's a
That's what
hope.
happens. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I'm definitely going to get one of the phenomenal items. And maybe Alice and I will take a trip down
You need to
and,
come to our
and
studio. We'll do a
exactly.
full experience. Please come down. We'd
Yeah,
love to
we will
host
do
both
it.
of
I would
you.
love that. Okay. Take care.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right. Take
you.
care. All right. Bye bye.